Okay. Aloha mai kako. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening as we dive into a proposal to establish a registration process for transient vacation rentals here on Hawaii Island and hosting platforms. My name is Ashley Kirkowitz. I'm a member of the Hawaii County Council representing District 4. Co-hosting this meeting this evening with me is Councilmember Heather Kimball, District 1. And here to answer any questions and provide support as we've been working in collaboration with the planning department is Director Jeff Darrow. We've got a short presentation for you folks tonight. And we will also be, holding space for any questions that you might have, but we probably won't even take the whole hour because it is really a straightforward process here. So for tonight, what we are looking to do is provide an overview of the legislation that has been proposed in Hawaii County over the last few years. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the transient vacation rental study that is currently being done by Hunden Partners. And then I'll turn it over to Councilmember Kimball, where she can talk about the proposed legislation and the timeline that we are looking at. Okay, legislative history. So 2018, sorry, Bill 108 was introduced and adopted by the council. And that piece of legislation regulated unhosted rentals and identified zoning districts on Hawaii Island where unhosted rentals would be permitted going forward. It also established a non-conforming use process for existing unhosted rentals that were outside of these permitted zoning districts. Bill 108 did not regulate hosted vacation rentals. In 2023, conversation started about Bill 121, and that was a comprehensive reform proposal that looked to ensure that all transient accommodation rentals were operating safely and legally. It was an attempt to provide regulations for hosted rentals here on the island, bringing them into the same sort of oversight as unhosted rentals here on Hawaii Island. We attempted to clarify standards of operation and to align our local law with Hawaii Revised Statute and the county's existing real property tax code. We looked to establish a registration mechanism for hosting platforms like Airbnb and VRBO. But long story short, after a couple of years, we recognized that we tried to do too much at once. And so at the end of 2024, we postponed the bill to the call of the chair, which ultimately shelved the bill. And it allowed for, I think, a more step-by-step approach that is, creating legislation that is informed by data, community input, and ongoing legal development, such as the Rose Hill and Neal Court case, which I won't get into tonight because I don't want to confuse the conversation, but just keep in mind that there are legal proceedings that help to inform future legislation. Now, as we were deliberating on Bill 121, the community asked for two things. They said, let's take a step back, let's pump the brakes, let's keep this really, really simple. Let's just look at registering. Let's not look at zoning. Let's not look at land use. Let's just register the fact that we are operating as vacation rentals. The other ask was, can you please conduct a financial impact analysis so that we can understand what this industry is doing for Hawaii Island's economy? There are statewide data sets for transient accommodation rentals, but really nothing specific to Hawaii Island because our market is so unique, right? Like we've heard from so many of you that you rely on your vacation rental to supplement your household income, to help pay for your agricultural operations. And we also see that transient vacation rentals are something that visitors are gravitating towards, with more than 40% of visitors choosing a TVR when they look to visit Hawaii Island. So having said that, the council adopted resolution 556-24, directing research and development to conduct a financial impact study, a comprehensive one where we are able to use the information that has been gathered through rigorous research and engaging stakeholders on the island to inform future policymaking. Next slide. So this study, R&D selected Hunden Partners, which specializes in economics of place. They've done over 1,000 destination studies since 2006 and have done several for Hawaii, so they're familiar with our market. The areas of focus that are part of their scope include a housing market analysis. There is an assumption that is out there that vacation rentals are affecting our housing availability, affordability, and our neighborhood character. So this study will assess that assumption and look to understand the practicality and the reality of vacation rentals transitioning to long-term housing rentals or not. It also takes a look at the economic impacts of TVRs, measuring its contributions to our economy through tax revenue, job creation, and local business impacts. And I think TVRs are especially interesting because they allow the regular person to have a slice of the hospitality industry pie and allows folks to be entrepreneurs. So that's being kept in mind as part of this study. And as far as the economics goes, wanting to understand what would happen to the visitor industry if vacation rentals were phased out or decreased in any way. The study also looks at visitor implications. How do TVRs impact the overall visitor experience? Do folks who stay in a TVR versus a hotel, do they engage with local businesses or the communities any differently? What do the profile of TVRs look like on our islands? And again, looking at various visitor patterns, length of stay, the geographic distribution of vacation rentals on our island. And then finally, it looks at a quality of life assessment. What do Hawaii Island residents who do not operate transient vacation rentals, how do they feel about them? Once we also identify through some air DNA data and through your completion of the survey, we'll have a more accurate sense of where vacation rentals are on Hawaii Island so that we can identify clusters and really consider, do we want to create visitor destination areas rather than creating more resort nodes? Because I don't think anybody is asking for building more hotels. So these are all things that are going to be considered as part of the study. And so there are 2 surveys that are currently being offered to community to participate. One is for suppliers, folks that own, operate vacation rentals, and another is for residents. I do want to say that I have looked at both of the studies that have been published by Hunden Partners. And I do think that there is an opportunity to expand upon some of the questions that are in the supplier survey. And this is, again, just based on conversations we've been hearing through discussion with Bill 121. Asking folks, do you operate agricultural activities on your property where you are also hosting a rental? What kind of visitor education do you employ as part of your hospitality experience? How many people do you employ through your vacation rental? Is it your full-time or your part-time job? And then asking the question, would you transition your TVR into a long-term unit? Why or why not? So these are questions that I will be asking Hunden Partners to add to the survey. That way we get as much data and information from folks that are operating here on Hawaii Island. They are anticipated to be providing us with a preliminary analysis of data in May with a completed analysis in June. And at that point, Councilmember Kimball and I, with R&D, will most likely host a presentation either in this format or to the council so that we can all review the findings together. Okay, Councilmember Kimball, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kirkwitz, for the excellent and thorough introduction. I know most of you, some of this is repeat material, but I think one of the key focuses for tonight is for us to really reflect to you that we have heard the comments that were made during the entire process of evaluating Bill 121. There was a lot of concern that we were moving too fast, we didn't have complete information. And so we're really trying to follow through with our promise to make sure that we really had a full assessment of the TAR environment in Hawaii County. One aspect of that is through this study that Councilmember Kirkowitz mentioned and went through, and we're really excited about seeing those results. But one of the things that we're acutely aware of is that the study alone is not going to give us all of the information that we need with respect to um, where TARs are located and how various TARs are operating. And so our first step in this process is to introduce a bill that will create a registration process for all transient accommodations. The reason for doing this, just to give you some numbers, at this time, the planning department has about 4,800 vacation rentals, STVRs, registered under their program. Now, currently, we only require unhosted renters, short-term vacation rentals to be registered. Some preliminary data from vendors that do provide analysis of the hosting platforms like Airbnb, VRBO, indicate that we have 2 times to 3 times as many actual short-term vacation rentals in operation. So a large number of those are probably perfectly legal, hosted, short-term vacation rentals, and we're not looking to shut those down, but we are trying to truly understand the full nature of the landscape of short-term vacation rentals in the county. And so our new bill will be introduced. We just got the number today. It will be Bill 47. It will be introduced on May 6th in committee, and you are, of course, always welcome to provide testimony at that time. Um, the key difference between Bill 121 and the new Bill 47 is because there are no amendments to the county's land use code. There's nothing in this new bill that has to do with where short-term vacation rentals, transient accommodations, whatever terminology you want to use, where they're permitted. It does not make sense to put this in the zoning code. So we are putting this registration process in Chapter 6, which is businesses of the Hawaii County Code. One of the other key differences is that instead of the planning department managing the registration process, we're actually moving the registration process to the finance department. Because they already have some information around transient accommodation rental operations through their TAT payment system, and they have other similar platforms that they're working with, it made more sense to move the registration process to the finance department. However, the enforcement that is tied to both the existing short-term vacation rental code in Chapter 25, as well as the state land use requirements within the HRS, and the enforcement around this registration will remain in the planning department. The main reason for that is that the planning department, unlike finance, already has rules and procedures around notice of violation as well as an appeals process. And it was really important to ensure that folks had a mechanism for appealing any violations with respect to the new registration process. So again, just to repeat, the registration process will be managed by the finance department. However, enforcement will take place through the planning department. The other thing that is just highlighting, this is just a straight up registration bill. There is nothing else that is covered in this bill. It is only the registration piece of Bill 121 and the hosting platform compliance piece. So that is the piece that requires platforms like Airbnb, VRBO, Expedia, Kayak, all of those that do list hosting platforms on their or do list transient accommodations on their sites to register with the county and provide us with monthly numbers of units that are registered and the TMKs and transient accommodation registration number. This code in particular is copied directly from the County of Honolulu with some minor edits. So just to go over the basics here, all transient accommodations or transient vacation rentals will have to register with the County of Hawaii under Bill 47. There are some exceptions. These are the transient accommodations that are provided, for example, to students that are enrolled in university or folks that are staying as part of a healthcare stay in a home, military personnel on active duty. These are all the exceptions that are already provided under state law with respect to payment of transient accommodation taxes. In addition, anyone that is renting as governed by the landlord tenant code, so that's month to month lease, those will also be exempted from the registration process that is going to be in this new bill. I also want to mention specific to Hawaii County, we also exempt people from registering if they are providing accommodations to folks that are traveling nurses or traveling doctors. So folks that are healthcare workers that are employed within a medical facility in the county. That was something that we recognized early on that we wanted to make sure that we allowed for that. I will note for that if any of you are one of these facilities that offers accommodations to traveling nurses and such, you still are subject to the transient accommodations tax through the state. So just because you are exempted from the registration at the Hawaii County level, please be aware that you still have that requirement at the state. Um, let's see, in addition, bed and breakfasts will be excluded if they are have received a use or special use permit through the planning department or through the code that is in chapter 25. So if you've already received a bed and breakfast use or special use permit, you will be exempted from the registration process, and you will be given a transient vacation rental number that you will be able to use to list your vacation rental on any of the hosting platforms. That'll be one of the requirements, is that the hosting platforms include that number. Just give me the next slide here. Okay, what I really want to have very clear as you leave tonight is what this bill does and doesn't do. So it does cover the documentation that is needed to register. This is very similar to what is included in Bill 121. It's the information about the rental itself, the TMK, the address, information about the owner, the host, or the operator if you have an operator, a reachable person if you are operating an unhosted rental, things like your transient accommodation tax number, your general excise tax number. The list really isn't much different. We are still asking for an affidavit showing that you meet the health and safety requirements, as well as a requirement that you acknowledge that there are potentially real property tax impacts to operating a short-term vacation rental in the county. If you are registering as a hosted rental, the initial registration fee will be $250 per the current version of the bill. Registration of an unhosted rental will be $500 for the initial registration. If you have already registered with the county as a rental, you're part of that 4,800 that are already registered with the county. You will not have to do that initial registration again. You will be given a transient vacation rental number, and you will just be subject to the annual renewal process. Um, so in addition to the initial registration, there is an annual renewal process. This is just to make sure that we have all of your data current. If there's any changes in the status of your vacation rental, who your operator is, who your reachable person, we just want to make sure that that is all current. There will be an annual renewal fee of $100 for a hosted rental and $250 for a unhosted rental. There are fines set with respect to failure to register. There is the possibility of up to a $10,000 fine if you fail to register. with the county and there is prima facie evidence that you are operating, that would be prima facie evidence would be the county is able to book, your vacation rental and you're not actually registered with the county, or we are able to find your listing on one of the hosting platform sites and you haven't registered. In addition to that, fine, if there is not an effort to come into compliance, there is the potential for additional fines of up to 2 times the highest nightly rate from the last 6 months. Um, it also defines the conditions under which a registration might be canceled by the county. These conditions are, for example, submitting fraudulent information with your application, for example, saying that this is a hosted transient vacation rental when in fact it's operating in an unhosted manner. Um, there is, of course, because as I mentioned, the planning department will be the enforcement entity, the opportunity to appeal any of those decisions. And the appeals board will handle those appeals to any notices of violation under this part of the code, again, in chapter 6. One of the things that I want to make very clear is unlike Bill 121, this bill does not make any changes to the current land use law of the county. So there are no changes to the short-term vacation rental areas where they're permitted, the conditions that are required for them to be permitted. There's no changes to non-conforming use certificates. Again, it's just an amendment to Chapter 6. There are no amendments in this bill to the zoning code. We will wait until after the study comes to us, as well as the data that comes from the registration process to make any decisions around any land use changes. In addition, this bill does not make any changes to the standards of operation. So that was, again, also part of Bill 121, but this bill is just a straight up registration bill and does not make any changes to standards of operation. It also does not make any changes to real property tax code. There was some confusion about Bill 121 because we referenced the tax code in that bill. Bill 121 actually didn't make any changes to the tax code either, but I want to be very clear that there are no changes to Chapter 19, the tax code, property tax code for Hawaii County in this bill. Even though I do want to ensure everybody, you should make sure to check with real property tax before you begin transient vacation rental operations because there are property tax impacts with respect to doing so. So this bill does not change that, but you should be aware of those potential impacts on your own. And then finally, one of the amendments to Bill 121 was the proposal to create visitor destination areas. These would be areas where there's already a high volume of transient vacation rentals. They're appropriate places for vacation rentals. For example, near the volcano where there are not very many hotel accommodations available, but our visitors do want to stay in that area. This bill does not do anything with vacation destination areas either. That is something else that we're looking at exploring in the long term once we have more data. Just to share the timeline, so Bill 47 will be introduced, as I said, on May 6th, and that will go through at least one hearing there in committee. It would then go to two council hearings before adoption. I will say that it's very likely that the bill will remain in committee for a hearing or two as our colleagues have an opportunity to consider it and propose amendments. All of those meetings are opportunities for you to provide us with testimony. This bill will not go through the planning commissions. It is not an amendment to Chapter 25 or Chapter 23. Since it is an amendment to Chapter 6, instead, there isn't the requirement that it goes through planning commissions. But we will be certain to use as much time as we need to incorporate feedback from the public with this bill, including responding to your questions and answers with regard to this webinar. As Ashley mentioned, we expect the study to be available to us sometime in early June. With that, we will be using this process to evaluate the opportunity to work with some different vendors, some contractors that will provide us the service with respect to evaluating listings that are hosted on the hosting platform websites, VRBO, Kayak, Expedia, all of those. There are several vendors out there that offers the service of evaluating the listings that are on the public facing websites and providing that to the county so that we can match up our registrations with the reporting that they have about where vacation rentals are located and how they're operating. That will happen sometime in July, we're expecting. Later in that month, we may have some introduct amendments to the land use code, chapter 25. We do know we already need to do some cleanup in that chapter with respect to the permitted areas and whatnot that are already in there. So I'm not going to make any commitments about what we're going to do, if we're going to do anything, but I will say that we are probably going to come in just with some cleanup amendments that will make it more clear about where transient vacation rentals are permitted and the conditions under which they're permitted. But there may be other changes at the result of the study and the registration process. The Chapter 25 amendments, of course, will go to the planning commissions for review, so we will have that presented to the Leeward and Windward planning commissions sometime August, September of this year, and then those bills will come back for consideration to council sometime October, November. So that is our timeline moving forward. We will also be potentially introducing the vacation rental nodes as another bill at some point in this area in this time frame based on the feedback we get both from the consultant and from the survey and registration data. With that, I will stop sharing my screen. That is the conclusion of the overview of the new legislation, again, Bill 47. We do have the final version available. The version that is currently up on the Hawaii County TAR website does have some minor clerical errors that we have fixed. So after we're done with this webinar, we will be posting the final version of the bill for everyone to review before the hearing on the 6th. So thank you for participating and sharing with us some time with us tonight. Ashley, do you have any final words you'd like to say before we close up?
I think you did a great job of explaining the simplicity of this. That we're going to need to continue to remind folks that what is being proposed in this bill 47 is simply a registration process. It has nothing to do with zoning. It has nothing to do with land use. I think it's important for us to get a really accurate picture of who is operating where. And there's a heavy amount of skepticism in the questions. I totally get it. I'm in government and I'm even skeptical of government, okay? Like, I'll be really honest with you. But this is honestly an attempt to work with community from the ground up. Folks asked for a registration process to keep things very simple. We are starting with that. We are also doing the fiscal impact analysis that the community wanted. We know that Hawaii Island is a very unique market in that many of the hosted rentals are part of farm operations. We get that. We want to make sure that all of this is taken into consideration so negative impacts are not made with future policymaking. We are looking to work with you in partnership with you to guide any kind of legislation. Also, please recognize that there's Hawaii revised statutes that we're having to align with, and a couple of legal proceedings that also impact just the future of this legislation. But you can count on Councilmember Kimball and I to continue to work in partnership with the community to make sure that this is legislation that is well informed based on what is happening on Hawaii Island.
Great overview, Ashley, of what our intentions, and I'll just add to that. As Ashley was speaking, I was taking the opportunity to scroll through some of the questions that we're getting. And again, our intention is to review all those, compile them, and put together an FAQ, which we will put on the Hawaii County TAR website in the next few days. But I do see the concern and the skepticism. I want you to all be aware that, you know, our efforts are really to make sure that everyone is operating safely and legally. We don't have the intention to shut down folks that you know, use this as a way to make ends meet. Our local residents, we know that this is part of um, how you are able to stay here and keep your families here and send your kids to college. We also know for our farmers, it's not a great place to do the farming business without supplemental income. So that's not our intention either. And we do look forward to more public input as we go through this process. I want to just pass it to Director Darrow if he wants to make any closing words. He was just here to offer support, but do you have anything you'd like to add, Jeff, before we sign off for the night?
Maybe not add. I mean, I do see the Q&As coming in, but this is the first step. I know that we are going to be continuing on and addressing the areas within the zoning code at some point as well, so that it will align with this registration process. The intent is to make this an easier process. We've been watching presentations from different registration type platforms, and some of them make it really easy to be able to register. So looking forward to that, because it has been a complicated process up to this point. But if we can ask that you continue to work with us and provide us with your feedback and support. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you for all your hard work, Heather and Ashley.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, with that, that concludes our webinar presentation. Ashley and I, of course, are always available for questions if you have them, and we will be posting the final draft that is going to committee and any FAQs on the website in short order. So thank you very much.
Have a great night.